when you're selling a subscription, you have to take people on a journey.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
I mean, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and once again, the transformational relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today our guest is Amy Konary. Here are 3 things you want to know about Amy before we start. She spent 19 years at IDC responsible for digital business models. This is before they were even popular. She's been 2.5 years now at Zora, helping companies through their business transformations. And she's founder and chair of the Subscribed Institute. I cannot wait to hear about that. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, great. Hey, how did you get into pricing?
Does the Price is Right count as an on-ramp to pricing?
Were you good at that? I can't do
I
that.
was really good at that. You know what I always was fascinated by was the psychology of pricing. And so I've always been interested in it, but the way that I got involved in pricing from a career perspective was when I was at IDC, I launched and ran the practice on software as a service. And my primary role was to sort of size the opportunity. So understand, how the market was developing. But in doing that work, I was talking to a lot of companies that were trying to build SaaS businesses. And they had a lot of questions on pricing and packaging that no one could answer at the time because these were brand new businesses. And in the software industry, the way that software had always been sold as a perpetual license, et cetera, it's very different from the way that a subscription business might want to go to market and price and package. And so I started to talk with companies about what they were doing and how it was different, and saw a real opportunity to build out really a consulting practice on pricing and packaging specifically for software businesses that were trying to grow subscription models. And so I launched a practice in 2004 on that and ran that through 2017 or so, and worked with almost every technology provider, software, hardware, et cetera, that was trying to build an as-a-service business model. At that time was probably my customer. So I saw a lot of really fascinating pricing and packaging challenges and issues, and got really interested in behavioral economics at the time, and still am, in part because you're selling relationships when you're selling subscription. And so all of the sort of principles about how people make decisions and the balance of simplicity with flexibility and the paradox of choice, all these sort of behavioral economic concepts seem very, very strong when it comes to subscription pricing. So that's really been, I guess, a key focus of mine for the last decade or more. And I continue to see lots of really interesting pricing and packaging challenges that companies who are building subscription models face across industries. And so of all of the topics I discussed, that's a really a key one.
So I've been in pricing for over 20 years, but I probably came to subscriptions maybe about 2 years ago and started looking at it. And oh my gosh, my eyes have been so widely opened widely, because it's such a different thing. And then you take what you've learned in subscriptions and you say, well, would this have worked in traditional business? And so the thing that makes me want to bring this up is you've talked a lot about pricing and packaging. And in traditional business, we talk a little bit about good, better, best, but it's really how do I put a price on a product? Once you get to subscriptions, that's like an integral part of the decision process that you're making.
Absolutely. And I think one of the key shifts that I saw, I did pricing and packaging work in software with companies that weren't selling subscriptions. And I think they built those models in the traditional sense. In software, you've never really been able to do cost plus pricing because the marginal cost of additional products, it doesn't make sense. But when you're selling a perpetual license product, you've got to think of delivering all the value up front. And people would do 6, 8, 10, 12-month studies, figure out what the right price would be. They'd set it, they'd publish it. They know there was discounting and things in the background, but they wouldn't come and do another big project like that for a long time. Whereas in subscription, and we sell this to our customers all the time at Zora, typically the first price that you come out with, it's going to be the wrong one. And so the process is a lot more iterative. You're almost doing your research with a price point out in the market, as opposed to doing, the 6-12 month research project, then coming up with the perfect price and getting it out there and keeping it that way. So you have to really be open to the change and process with the price point itself, because customers will tell you how much they value and what they value. And so you have to always be listening. The other key difference, and I mentioned packaging, is when you're selling a subscription, you have to take people on a journey. So rather than selling all the value up front, you have to make sure that they can see value really quickly. And you'll also have to give them a path forward. Okay. And so I think good, better, and best is one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is the use of trials and how that comes into play, the use of contracts and contract terms, monthly versus annual. There's just a lot of different components, because the trade-offs. You want to acquire people, subscribers, you want to retain subscribers, but you also need to monetize subscribers. And it's just really difficult to do all three of those things at the same time. There's a lot of segmentation that comes into play, a lot of packaging expertise that comes into play. And I think also the openness to agility and iteration, which may not be something that an existing product organization might have as part of their core competency to begin with, if they're new to subscription.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm loving this conversation. I want to talk to you forever. So you just brought up what I call the 3 revenue buckets, right? And so you called it acquisition, retention, and monetization. I often hear it expansion instead of monetization.
Mm-hmm.
And what I call it is win, keep, and grow. You got to win customers, keep customers, grow customers. Right? And so I just find that a fascinating thing that most companies don't even think about until you get to the subscription world.
Right. Absolutely. And we, a lot of times we talk about that, but we also contrast the way that you used to grow and how, in the past it was units or transactions, having more of those and then increasing your margin on those transactions. And that was how you grow. But you're right. It's also 3 things in subscription, but it's very different. And, a lot of times we'll get asked the question, well, what should we focus on? Should we focus on acquiring new subscribers, or should we focus on retaining them? Or because it is very hard to do all 3 of those things at once. And so the answer is often, it depends where you are in your business. For a new subscription business, you absolutely have to focus on new subscriber acquisition. And that might dictate, or it does dictate, how you price and package. You want it to be really simple, easy to see how you're going to see value really quickly, very transparent. You want to remove the risk that the customer might perceive, right?
You need to get more people into your network. You gotta
Absolutely.
get them ready to go.
Right. You can't monetize unless you have that relationship, have that subscriber. But then what tends to happen is a company that does really good job of acquisition will reach a point at some point where they say, wow, we have people leaving us at the same rate, or sometimes even faster than they're coming in. Or we see an opportunity, people are loving what we're doing, but this one size fits all approach, it's difficult. There are people that want to dig in farther with us. And then there are people that that can't recognize all the value because they're not able to use all the functionality in the terms of software, or they don't want that level of service, whatever that might be. And so that's when we start to see companies do more of the segmentation and get into tiering pricing as an example. And I think the other thing that's really different in subscription is the notion that you have this ongoing relationship. And I think it's particularly relevant in today's times, that you might want to put a pause button on, or you might want to decrease the level of relationship that you have. And as a provider, it's really important to be able to allow people to put things on hold, but keep that relationship rather than simply canceling that relationship. So that's another element. I think maybe falls into the pricing packaging world. Maybe it's more contract terms, but something that subscription businesses have to think about, just because it is an ongoing relationship, that a product-oriented business just might not be in their wheelhouse.
Yeah. So I just want to hear your thoughts on this, but one of my favorite things about subscriptions, when I think about the difference between a traditional business and a subscription business, in my traditional business, I want you to pay me for my product, and I actually don't care if you never use it.
Yep.
In a subscription business, I care a ton if you're using my products, because if you're not using it, you're not going to keep paying me.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting. There are sometimes I'll attend pricing discussions about subscription, and you hear the term, let sleeping dogs lie. So you may have some subscribers or people that are subscribing that aren't using the subscription. Maybe just want to leave them alone, and not remind them that they're paying you every month. And I actually disagree with that. Our CEO of Zora calls those zombie subscribers, right? These people that are subscribing, but they're not seeing any benefit from your service. They're not getting any value. And those actually aren't people that you want. You want to be providing value. You want people on board who are seeing the value. And so one of the ways that you can kind of determine that is by tracking and understanding usage. And there are lots of different ways to kind of measure and quantify that. And of course, we see companies offering usage and consumption-based pricing. And we've done some studies at Zora, because we're running so many subscription companies on our system, we're able to look at an anonymous and aggregate basis across the companies that we have running businesses and look at different ways that they price and package, and then the impact on growth and retention. And so we find that those companies that offer usage-based or consumption-based pricing as part of their overall pricing mix grow faster than those that don't. Or we've actually found a sweet spot. You can be too flexible and offer too much of your pricing associated with consumption. So as a former analyst and someone who loves spending a lot of time with data, I've been fascinated digging into what the sort of our subscription economy benchmarks have been able to tell us about different types of pricing for subscription businesses. And clearly, consumption pricing is an important one to have as part of your portfolio if you're a subscription company.
So why do you think 100% consumption isn't the right answer, isn't the optimal answer?
My take on that is that it is difficult to predict cost if you're a customer. Mm-hmm. And it is difficult if you're a provider to predict revenue, because you don't know what that consumption could be. And so from working with companies over the years, building out consumption pricing, there's always some baseline of consumption that you'd offer in a tier, and then you'd have that overage model. And so that overage model is essentially what we see when we see consumption being a certain percentage of your approach. And I think it does come back to that wanting to have that level of predictability and the ability to predict and project what you're going to pay. And then if you're a provider, what kind of revenue you'll receive.
Yeah, excellent. This has been fascinating so far, but I really want to know, tell me about the Subscribed Institute. What is it? What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you probably see all the time with the individuals you interact with and the people that are listening to your podcast, the art of becoming a successful subscription business, pricing and packaging is a balance of art and science. And I have also found over the years that although I think we're all very familiar with subscription models, most of our businesses are rooted in the traditional product economy. Even if we're a service business, typically the service revolves around some sort of a product deliverable. And so we don't all inherently in our backgrounds have subscription and subscription economy in our wheelhouse. And so the objective of the Subscribed Institute is it's a think tank for executives that are running subscription businesses and who are really looking for a peer network of other executives running subscription businesses, as well as benchmarks and research. So I mentioned some of the benchmark data that we have on packaging and pricing, for example. We've also created frameworks and models, a maturity model, playbooks for different industries. And we hold live events as well, where we connect people with one another. It's really an opportunity for people to help provide guidance and advice to others on how to run a subscription business, how to evolve your business, and for Zora as a software company that offers a platform that enables companies to monetize their subscription relationships. We want to make sure we're helping people remove the obstacles that they might face in running a healthy subscription business. And in many cases, those are business obstacles. So we have around 800 executives from 500 or so companies that are part of the think tank. We hold events every month. Up until recently, these were primarily live events, but we're obviously reimagining how we engage in terms of virtual events. The topics include things like culture. What does the culture of a subscription business look like? Change management. How can you, looking at the various parts of your business that need to change and adapt, what's the best way for pushing those forward? Channel. How do you get your channel engaged in selling subscription? The go-to-market topics are always really important and of interest to the Institute. And I think at the end of the day, we're a support group for the industry. I think a lot of businesses, subscription businesses are very resilient. They've got that recurring revenue going forward, and so that's something that certainly helps in times of crisis. But I think we're all grappling with some of the same types of issues and topics, and so being able to bring people together and giving them a forum for talking that through, I think, is going to be the biggest value that we'll be able to provide over the next few weeks and months for sure.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. We are going to have to wrap this up, but let me ask the final question. What's one piece of pricing advice that you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
I would read the book Subscribed. It's a bit of a shameless plug, but I didn't write it. So do you have it in your bookshelf there? All right, I can see that. So yeah, I mean, we silver lining, we probably all have some time for reading these days. It's a great story about a business and ultimately about an industry, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I think that was the first subscription book I read, and it was fabulous and truly started to open my eyes to what this whole subscription world was about. So absolutely fascinating. Great. Thank you. Amy, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
I think LinkedIn is always great for me.
Okay, I will spell your name in the show notes so people can spell it, but it's not the way I would have spelled it, just hearing the word set. So, all right. Episode 63, all done. Let's see, what was my favorite part of the podcast? I think it was hearing Amy talk about how integral packaging is to pricing in the subscription world. Now, what was your favorite part? Please let us know in the comments or wherever you downloaded and listened. While you're at it, would you please give us a 5-star review? These are hugely valuable to us. Don't forget, we have a community at community.championsofvalue.com. You can go there and participate in all of the publications that we do. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast or about pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.